One of the most potentially frightening aspects of being a Christian or following the ways of Christ or the ways of Yeshua, if you're into the name thing, but one of the most potentially frightening aspects of being a Christian, of following that way, is knowing that when you put your trust in Christ, all, with a capital A, all of hell takes arms against you, intending evil upon your life. The one thing that keeps us at peace is knowing that no matter what comes, God is in charge. The Almighty is in charge. And he takes what was intended for evil and he can turn it into good. I got a few things I want to share with you guys here. And this is from FamilyLife.com, written by Randy Alcorn. It says, since God is the source of all goodness, his glory is the wellspring of all joy. What God does for his own sake benefits us. Therefore, whatever glorifies him is good for us. And that includes the suffering he allows or brings into our lives. God refines us in our suffering and graciously explains why. If you don't understand that the universe is about God and his glory, and that whatever exalts God's glory also works for your ultimate good, then you will misunderstand this passage and countless others. He's referring to Isaiah 48:10. Joseph Son, who faced much evil in communist Romania, told me once that this world with all its evil is God's deliberately chosen environment for people to grow in their characters. The character and trustworthiness we form here, we take with us there, to heaven. Romans and Peter 4:19 make clear that suffering is grace from God. It is a grace given us now to prepare us for living forever. Mountain climbers could save time and energy if they reached the summit in a helicopter, but their ultimate purpose is the conquest, not efficiency. So sure, they want to reach a goal, but they want to do so the hard way by testing their character and resolve. God could create scientists, mathematicians, athletes, and musicians. He doesn't. He creates children who take on those roles over a long process. So we learn to excel by handling failure. Only in cultivating discipline, endurance, and patience do we find satisfaction and reward. As dentists, physicians, parents, and pet owners regularly demonstrate, suffering may be lovingly inflicted for a higher good. We think to love means to do no harm, when it really means to be willing to do short-term harm for a redemptive purpose. A physician who re-breaks an arm in order for it to heal properly harms his patient in order to heal him. In his book, A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis, he wrote, but suppose that what you are up against is a surgeon whose intentions are wholly good. The kinder and more conscientious he is, the more inexorably he will go on cutting. If he yielded to your entreaties, if he stopped before the operation was complete, all the pain up to that point would have been useless. What do people mean when they say, I am not afraid of God because I know he is good? Have they never been to the dentist? If cancer or paralysis or a car accident prompts us to draw on God's strength to become more conformed to Christ, then regardless of the human, demonic, or natural forces involved, God will be glorified in it. A friend whose husband died once wrote, one thing that I've become convinced of is that God has different definitions for words than I do. For example, he does work all things for my eternal good and his eternal glory, but his definition of good is different than mine. My good would never include cancer or a young widow. My good would include healing and dying together in our sleep when we are in our 90s. But cancer was good because of what God did. Because of what God did that he couldn't do. Someone's knocking on my door. These kinds of things happen on my show. I'm just going to let it go. We'll figure it out later. I'll continue. But cancer was good because of what God did that he couldn't do any other way. Cancer was, in fact, necessary to make Bob and me look more like Christ. So in love, God allowed what was best for us in light of eternity. While personal suffering doesn't always come as punishment for sin, this doesn't mean it never does. God speaks of bringing judgment on his children for participating in the Lord's Supper in an unworthy manner in Corinthians chapter 11, 27 through 32. David knew he had suffered because of his sin. Christ said, "Those whom I love, I rebuke and discipline." God's occasional direct punishment in this life reminds us of judgment to come, just as his occasional direct rewards in this life remind us of coming rewards. But we should never assume we know God's reasons when he hasn't made them plain. So when Christ's disciples asked whose sin lay behind a man born blind, Jesus said, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned." That's in John chapter 9. Jesus then redirected his disciples from thinking about the cause of the man's disability to considering the purpose for it. He said this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. Eugene Peterson paraphrases Christ's words this way: "You're asking the wrong question. You're looking for someone to blame. There is no such cause and effect here. Look instead for what God can do." Nick Vujicic entered this world without arms or legs, as told in his life story on his website, www.lifewithoutlimbs.org. Both his mom and his dad, an Australian pastor, felt devastated by their firstborn son's condition. If God is a God of love, they said, then why would he let something like this happen, and especially to committed Christians? But they chose to trust God despite their questions. So Nick struggled at school, where other students bullied and rejected him. At that stage in my childhood, he said, I could understand his love to a point, but I still got hung up on the fact that if God really loved me, why did he make me like this? I wondered if I had done something wrong and began to feel certain that this must be true. Thoughts of suicide plagued Nick until one day the 15-year-old read the story in John chapter 9 about the man born blind, said, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. He surrendered his life to Christ. Now at age 26, he's earned a bachelor's degree and encourages others as a motivational speaker. Due to the emotional struggles I had experienced with bullying, self-esteem, and loneliness, Nick says, God began to instill a passion of sharing my story and experiences to help others cope with whatever challenge they might have in their own lives. Turning my struggles into something that would glorify God and bless others, I realized my purpose. The Lord was going to use me to encourage and inspire others to live their fullest potential and not let anything get in the way of accomplishing their hopes and dreams. God's purpose became clearer to me, and now I'm fully convinced and understand that his glory is revealed as he uses me just the way I am. And even more wonderful, he can use me in ways others can't be used. When Nancy and I saw David in Florence, it took our breath away. To produce his masterpiece, Michelangelo chose a stone that all other artists had rejected. Seeing that huge marble block's hidden potential, he chipped away everything that wasn't David. The master worked daily to transform it into something surpassingly beautiful. Now, if marble had feelings, it wouldn't like the chiseling process. In fact, it might actually resent the sculptor. While Michelangelo may not have called upon the stone to cooperate with him, God has called us to yield ourselves by submitting to his chisel. Because we fail to see the person God intends to form through our adversity, we too may resent the chiseling. The master artist chose us, the flawed and unusable, to be crafted in the image of Christ, to fulfill our destiny in displaying Jesus to the watching universe. We ask God to remove the chisel. We ask God to remove the chisel because it hurts. But it's a means of transformation. God uses suffering to purge sin from our lives, strengthen our commitment to him, force us to depend on his grace, to bind us together with other believers, to produce discernment, to foster sensitivity, to discipline our minds, impart wisdom, and stretch our hope. It causes us to know Christ better. And that's that article right there that I wanted to share with you.